I'll just start with Jake. Jake, Tiger
Yeah.
King, problematic.
So I feel like it's an interesting case study on like a criminal underside to something that we didn't know existed, kind of. But ultimately, it becomes a reality show more than a documentary. And so I think, yeah, I'm going to go with pretty problematic, especially like the reactions, I think, of viewers. Problematic, yeah.
Josh?
I think it definitely is. One thing I was talking about with my girlfriend yesterday, we were kind of going back and forth, and yeah, it is like they do talk about how like bad these people are and how they treat these animals, but it also like brings awareness at the same time. It's like the Easter Bunny. You like some people know, but some people just think it's like people out there like don't exist. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think my answer is kind of contingent on that as well. Like, when we finished it in the house, it was one of the first things we watched all together in our quarantine moment. And I made the point, like, when all of these kinds of shows happen, cultural phenomenon, I try to like focus on, there's still some mysticism, Christian bullshit inside of me, but like I try to focus on like, what the hell are we supposed to get out of this? You know, because like we all did have this experience together. It's such a weird thing to happen all at once. And I think that part of what I'm seeing, at least from my perspective, is I think, of course, I think it's problematic, but I think what is interesting to think about is how easy it is for us to ingest problematic shit.
For sure.
Because if we never asked ourselves, are these people fucked up? It's like produced in such a way where, I don't know about you how you guys watched it, but like we fucking binge watched it in like 2 days. Like,
Same.
It was done. And that should be troubling because I enjoyed the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like as fucked up as all of it was, I enjoyed every minute of it. And that's the first thing I started thinking about was, I know how obvious it is. This is fucked up, but how did I enjoy that so much? So I usually say, does anyone have Exhibit A? But does anybody got a jumping off point?
Yeah, so I think I do on that. So the question that you're kind of posing is just like, what's enjoyable about it? Yeah.
Sure, we'll go.
Or
with
maybe
that.
like what's redeeming about it is that kind of.
See, that's what I think the conversation might be pinnacled on. Like, is there? I agree with Josh. I think there is, and I think we can all understand this perspective. I don't know if you all saw. Did you all see that meme going around where it was like different characters of the show, and they like assigned each character to like a geographic region of like the Tri-County area? Have you seen that?
You talking about the MVL one?
Yeah, well, there was that one. There was one going around like for like New Lex and Perry County area.
Oh, I see.
But I think those kind of redneck white trash folks are underrepresented, especially in like the time of like Trump. I think there's a lot of assumptions made about who, we'll call it flyover country. Not that Florida is, but it seems like a lot of the folks in the documentary were kind of transplants into Florida. Like, when I think Florida, I think, like retiree or like,
exactly,
Hispanic folks. But I think when we watch the show from our perspective, like I do think there's an accuracy to like, I guess I think that a lot of folks don't know how fucked up people can really be, because as absurd and sensationalized as the documentary was, we've all met someone like that at a gas station where we grew up.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, me being from Zanesville, we all know what happened there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was in the documentary too, right?
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
first episode. And that was like a mile from my dad's house. Jamie, I don't know if you ever came to where my dad lived.
Yeah.
Back in the day, yeah. So like between I-70 and my dad's house was Terry Thompson's house. And there was points where like my grandma lived on Ridge Road, which is, right around the corner. And like there was a black bear in her front yard one day.
And that's the kind of thing, that's something I've been seeing a lot too is, if we're talking about like the awareness that a show like that can bring, like, well, there's something like, is it like 10,000 tigers in captivity, but only like 4,000 in nature?
Mm-hmm.
You think about like how much of that's happening, like, your grandma had a black bear in her fucking front yard, and like that's a thing that you would never imagine happening. And then you got to think about like, could that happen somewhere else? I guess I'm going to be the sensational feminist here, but I think it's worth talking about like how easy it was for us culturally to accept Carol Baskins as like she is the antagonist of the story.
Right.
And I think that it's an awkward thing to have happen, on two conditions. Me and Jake talked about it earlier just briefly, but she was 19 when her whole story started, and the alleged husband that she allegedly fed to the tiger. I honestly believe she did kill her husband, but like there was so much ambiguity to I just had a lecture class today about traumatic events in childhood and development. Like at 19 years old, you experience something like being picked up by a 40-year-old man on the side of the road, and then you become their lover and wife. And like that's a really fucked up thing to happen like that when you're 19. I mean, we're all in our 20s now. Like I can't imagine something like that happening when I was 19, radically changing my life. And so when you contextualize that to if he was abusive or maybe even it was reciprocal, like it doesn't seem that out of place to kill your husband who's a millionaire if you're in some troubling relationship like that. But that aside, sure, maybe I do think she killed her husband, but like, is that the worst thing we saw through this series?
Yeah, definitely. It's like we clearly see Joe Exotic being just a piece of shit the whole time with no excuses to that. And yet there are like 16,000 people who have signed a petition that he should be freed. And sure, like a large part of that's just a joke and a meme. But how easy it is for people just to ignore that and say, oh, free Joe, he did nothing wrong. But Carol Baskins definitely killed her husband. Again, I'm in the same boat. I mean, she probably did. Because everyone in the show is outside of like the exploited workers, everyone in the show is kind of terrible. So I'm not like arguing for her favor, but just, like the perception of her being the antagonist and Joe being a good guy is ridiculous.
I mean,
and what's more, like, I don't know. I really don't know if she did kill her husband, or not, because she's definitely painted as the antagonist, which is like, this is just a reality show, not a documentary.
Do you think she killed her husband, Josh?
Absolutely.
Like
sardine oil.
The sardine oil thing was like so
sketchy.
That was
also like a weird thing to say.
What would she really just like say how she did it? Like, come on.
That was some fucking OJ shit. If I were to have done it.
Yeah, if I did it. Going off of what Jake had said about, I mean, the documentary clearly showed that he was easily drawing people in. And that's exactly what he did to us. Like, right? He seems charming until he has to be real, and then he's, shithead.
I think, to talk about the whole point of how we kind of make Joe Exotic the protagonist of the story, we can kind of keep it in that realm of like just the problematic element of the effect. I'll call it the predatory behavior, much like Carol Baskin's husband, 40-year-old preying on a 19-year-old. Joe Exotic literally did that three times in the fucking documentary.
Yeah, 3 times.
What's his?
And we don't even know how old his other husband was.
Like the
I know
newest
there's like
one.
a fourth husband out there.
I can look it
I don't
up.
know if he was a young kid or not, but
His name was Dylan, right?
Like the newest one? Yeah,
no, that's the newest one. But there was one before, I think, any of the ones seen in the
I
show.
feel like I heard he died though.
In a fucking house fire, because there's also a lot of house fires connected to the show. I just want to say.
But I think,
Fire.
well, obviously, that's one of the MOs for Joe Exotic. But I think specifically, it's worth noting the relationship Joe Exotic had with Travis and is it John? Is that the name of the other dude?
No, John. Well, his first.
Yeah.
Yeah, John.
Like those relationships, not only is it like, it isn't for me because they didn't explicitly say whether or not they were anything but heterosexual. They left that open, and it's not for us to speculate what their sexuality was. But there was the assumption that they were heterosexual.
Yeah.
And it seemed very manipulative. Didn't seem, it was like obviously he intentionally picked folks who had these chemical dependencies. And if you know anyone who does drugs, you'll do almost anything to get drugs. And that might mean recalibrating your sexuality. But the fact remains, it's the same. Both of those two were 19 when Joe preyed on them. And so when we're talking, that evidence was like right in our face too. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So when we make Carol Baskins this, the caricature criminal, I think it says something about, just the embedded misogyny of our culture. Because we all did it. We all fuck Carol Baskins. Like, it's the fucking meme. And it's like still like in, right? You can post a note. And it's still in me right now. You know what I mean? It's still like, fuck Carol Baskins. She's the antagonist of the series. And so I think that inherent misogyny inside of the experience, I think, is one of the most important things we can talk about. But from there, I think we should talk about how these side characters, I don't know, like, I don't want to impose too much of like a theory heavy idea, but like, being the Marxist wannabe, like, so much labor was exploited throughout this entire series. And then even the documentary hinges on those exploited laborers. You know what I mean? Because like we get the juiciest details by them revisiting these emotional traumas to assimilate this entire documentary. And so I guess the question I would pose is like, what do you think's the most fucked up thing, whether it's Carol or Doc or Joe?
Yo, I think
talk about some of the fucked up shit they do to the workers.
I mean, so this is not going to be exactly on that point, but it's a little bit to it, just like the side characters. But I want to jump back to your point kind of about like Joe's relationships a little bit. I just want to say one of the most problematic things for me in the show is Travis's suicide and how they handle that. Just in the sense of like the complete disrespect of how they kind of treat him and show the funeral. And also, I think just as viewers, like, you need to put a fucking trigger warning in front of that shit. Like, that was a seriously fucking heavy scene. Like, that was fucking hard to watch. And just to come out of nowhere, I think that was a really messed up scene. And just, like, they exploited that for entertainment purposes. I think I even said it, that the funeral almost felt like a scene out of The Office, where he's singing that cringy fucking song. I don't know. Like, I think that was like just a deeply problematic and troubling subplot for them to kind of throw in. Obviously, it happened, so they need to address it. But I don't think they addressed that with like anywhere the tact or fairness that they could have. Because then also, you know, you have a character like Travis who can't stand up or defend himself. They really didn't show a lot of interviews of him. All of our opinions about him are kind of based around what other people told us. And that felt very exploitative, honestly.
That is true. Because I was interested. I could see him. I saw him dying. Like, I don't remember exactly when, but I just saw, like,
he says, "I'm smoking my last cigarette," which also,
well, it was before that.
Oh,
It was when I realized, like, they don't really have any, like, candid interview footage with him. You know what I mean? And once I realized, like, oh, something happened with him.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think when we were watching that scene, I think I don't know, like, I'm kind of desensitized to, like, violence and shit. I watch too many Rob Zombie movies, but it was fucked up. But, like, everyone in the room, though, I could feel it. Like,
right.
Just had this moment, and Stephanie mentioned, you know, there should have been some kind of content warning, because, like, it does just kind of come out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like, you made the point about the last cigarette line. They allude to it, but then it's like, it feels like, well, it wouldn't be that obvious, would it?
Right. Like, they're not gonna, like, give me, like, a dramatic build up to someone's death, are they? Oh no, they are.
Yeah, I think the narrative they paint for Travis, I think there's some redemption in, like, them including his mother. But even then, like, I think there's just some weirdness, because I still insist, like, it's weird that he didn't give the ashes to his mom.
Yeah.
He's, like, still sleeping with Travis by his bedside. Well, I guess he's not now, but.
First of all, if you don't talk about my golden nuggets at my funeral, you're not allowed to be there. Or whatever he says. Second of all, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he tells the story about a kid rubbing his balls in his face at a fucking funeral in front of his crying mother.
That's great.
Oh man, that was tough to watch.
Second of all, I think a big thing with Joe and, like, being interested in, you know, younger boys or whatever, I think he was kind of trying to keep up with Doc, you know, because he had all those chicks everywhere, you know, all the time. He had, what, like 7 or 8 or 9. I like when he asked the guy, he's like, how many girlfriends does Doc Ando have? I don't give a fuck, is what he said, or something like that. And so I think with that situation, I think he was trying to keep up with Doc, literally on everything.
Right, I think, and that's the dichotomy too. Is like, Doc is like, you know, one of these elitist establishment types. So, like, I guess, so I would start it from the scale of, like, my Uncle Roger used to be, like, one of those copper thieves, and so, like, he'd rob, like, local construction sites of, like, copper and all of that shit. Which is no different than, like, the politicians who are, like, robbing people's Medicare funds and their pension plans. So, like, Doc is doing, you know, the high scale, highbrow copper theft, whereas Joe Exotic is just, like, right in your face and you can't hide it. I mean, it's obvious you had that firsthand story of that girl who escaped.
Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, I mean, her perspective. I think if you were to kind of impose that on a young person like Carol Baskins, or even like Travis and John, like, and possibly Dylan, like that psychological manipulation, I think that's really telling to how deep it is that these folks are problematic, and only furthering the point of, like, how easy it was for us to ingest this without considering that in real time.
Carol killed her husband. No. That's actually all I need to say, so I'm leaving. No.
Josh, meet Sabrina.
Nice to meet
meet Josh.
Sabrina.
What's up? I think that like just the fact that Carol is advocating for something that she's literally doing, like that just fucking doesn't make any sense. The fact that she's profiting off of it too, and they arguably have a worse life at her place because they have to eat in those kennels. I don't know.
But isn't
I think
that so fucking American though?
Yeah,
To
exactly.
be like, you can't keep fucking big tigers in cages while you have big tigers in cages.
Yeah.
I think like if this show's really about anything, it's about not like really tigers, but how this insane desire for fame causes people to do fucking crazy shit, like possibly kill your husband, definitely put a hit out on someone, definitely just kill tigers. You know, like nobody in this show cares about animals, and I don't even think the viewer cares about animals. This is not a show about conservation, not really. I mean, they don't inform in any way on that. But I think if you could get anything out of it, it's that like all these people, Doc, Carol, Joe, the one thing they really want is fame and fortune, and like they just go fucking crazy. But I don't think people really watch it with that like context of like, oh, these people are fucking insane, and like their desire for like notoriety makes them just fucking imbeciles. I don't think it's really viewed like that. I think it's a more just true crime drama where, I don't know.
As you're saying that, I'm like literally remembering. So Joe Exotic, you heard him a few times. Like,
Wait,
what was the producer's name?
Did you guys watch
Rick.
the last episode that was just put on like a couple days ago?
Yeah,
I have not watched that yet.
His name was I got it right here.
Rick Kirkham, right?
Yeah, Rick Kirkham.
So when Rick's telling like his perspective, more than a few times, Joe's like, "Make me fucking famous, Rick." But like when we first meet Doc, he's like, he does that shit like, "Why don't I go in the house and you'll knock on the door?" And like knowing exactly how to set up like a good reality shot. And like I feel like the entire documentary, doesn't it start with Carol Baskin's like, "Do you want me crouched?" Or, you know, like you're trying to direct how to get that best shot. And when you contextualize it in that way, like these are weird sociopathic behaviors in pursuit of fame. And it makes you think about, in this moment, I'm thinking like, would anyone else act any differently in that situation? You know, like if the weird fucking thing you're intrigued about got you in some weird documentary and like you do that thing, you know, we like all grew up like playing music and shit, but like if you picked just a random 5 bands from anywhere in the country and told them you're going to make a Netflix documentary, would you not find out as much fucked up shit about them as we did with these motherfuckers?
Going back to Carol Baskin's situation at her place, one thing that kind of like bothered me was when they went to the thing they do the 1 year or whatever with all the volunteers and the t-shirts, like the t-shirt situation. It's like, oh yeah, you got to be here for, it's like my 3rd year. I got the blue shirt. Next year I get my green shirt. And then if
I want
20 years,
to add real fast.
Blue shirt.
The first years wear red shirts, which in Star Trek are the people that always die first. I'm just saying, I feel like that might be.
Like you're wearing one.
I know, like she would
Yeah,
kill me
actually.
probably. I'm gonna get fed to a tiger.
Well, I think that's interesting. You know, if we can talk about all of the exploited labor, because like the way we talked about how like Joe Exotic is like the you know, the downplayed version of all of the highbrow systems of like Doc and Carol.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Joe Exotic, his t-shirt system was like Lunchables, you know what I mean? Like you got whatever shitty expired Lunchable.
Fed his employees expired meat.
Yeah, literally.
And like paid them what, like $15 a day or some like fucked up shit.
I think that it was like $100 a week, right?
Something like that. I heard like 3 different numbers.
Like think about that. Like,
but it was always fucked up. It was always fucked up. The numbers they gave you.
If you thought about just like $500 a month and all the expired meat you can eat, like
it's a place to live.
A place to live too, probably.
Well, and then like seeing where they live too. Like there's like, I don't know. I grew up in a trailer, and like they can get really gross really fast. It's like,
Definitely.
like you have to be very intentional about keeping a trailer tidy, because if you don't, like, it's literally made of like
It takes
cardboard.
1 week, and you look like white trailer trash. It's like that simple.
Right, and if you like,
So,
if you
on
spill
this-
water on the floor, like it'll like
Yeah.
you can
Right.
ruin your house if you just like throw a water balloon against the wall. It's
on that point, so like, how much of the show do you think is just kind of like class tourism and just exploitation, similar to shows like, you know, My Strange Addiction or 600 Pound Life, kind of like those fucked up reality shows where it's just people watching this to feel better about their miserable lives? Like, how much of that's going on with people enjoying to watch this? Like, I feel like that.
honestly, I think, you know, if you contextualize that with the situation we're all going through with the pandemic and being stuck inside, I think it's it's probably so popular because of that, like the voyeurism of, well, look at these dirty fucks, you know,
Right.
Because I mean, if we do boil it down, because we live in such like a framed moral environment, not too many people are as shitty as the folks in this documentary. You know what I mean? Because like, especially when we're thinking about Joe Exotic's place, because he specifically chooses, you know, ex-cons and vulnerable,
But
malleable people.
what I think is like maybe depressing about that, though, is like, even though I think it's agreed upon pretty much that the employees of the zoo are overall the nicest and most understanding people in the show, people still, without a doubt, you know, there's so many jokes about them just being meth heads and crackheads, and, you know, like the like, there's definitely a lot of targeted jokes at their expenses, and a lot of them have kind of come and said, like, this is shitty. Like, I've been in the follow-up episode, a lot of them were just like, I've been clean for 5 years, like, fuck off. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
like,
think that's an interesting point to think about too, because like, I mean, I don't want to seem self-righteous, but like, I didn't really, I don't know, I grew up, my family are these kinds of people, so like, I don't really have that perspective when I see folks like that. The closest I got to, like, I don't know, being problematic myself with my perception, I think John, just the kind of character that looks fucked up. Like, you see him and you just assume the worst.
No shirt, just chilling.
Yeah, the no shirt really.
It took me a few episodes.
Well,
Admittedly, it took me a few episodes to humanize John in a way that I'm comfortable with. Because I just had the worst assumptions, and at the end of the day, I think he's probably one of the most well-meaning people in the show. I'm not going to say he's not problematic, because I think, you know, he wound up in the situation he was in because he probably had a lot of fucked up experiences being socialized as a problematic person. I mean, it's just intuitive to being exposed to the kind of life these people are exposed to. But in the sense of just meaning well, even just for if it was self-motivated, you know, because like there was one of the interviews when he found out shit was going down and he agreed to testify, and he was just like, I was his right-hand man for 15 years, and, you know, he's like, I don't know what they know, so I'm just going to cooperate. Just having that, you know, being able to like make that moral decision, I think is telling of a person's character. And he just seemed like one of the most genuine. But I would say he's probably one of the most demonized or like scrutinized in that meme world.
I don't think they knew that was going to be as popular as it did end up being.
Right. I think, you know, that's a point I think, you know, what I said earlier about it being a cultural moment. The way I described it when we were talking about it after we finished, it's like Tiger King is this moment's fidget spinner. You know, it's just a thing that happens, and no one can predict why until after the fact.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the fidget spinner is a good analogy, because like obviously it's directly tied to us like having nothing to do, you know, like we're stuck in our house. And it was like at the genesis of all of this happening. Like a lot of people still don't know, but like they're getting more acclimated to it. But like in the first week or two of quarantine, like how many people just know how to just be in their house, you know? And I think that definitely drove the popularity of Tiger King.
And the fact that it's just so out there and strange. Like a lot of privileged people like wouldn't know. Like, wait, what? Like if you didn't go to it, if you didn't never lived in a trailer and you see that, you're like, what the fuck? Like I've seen trailer trash, but I've never seen it. You know what I mean?
I think people are surprised by like redneck homosexuals. Like,
Yeah.
you've never been to Ohio if you've never like redneck homosexuals. I know it seems rare, but it's not really. Like, it's a pretty fucking common thing.
I think it's like crazy though. Like if someone's stereotypical, like homophobic, like a lot of people still are, unfortunately, and they look at that, and then you're like, oh, he's gay, so like, oh, we're trying to get acquainted to that, but then he just ends up being a predator anyways. So it's like kind of frames the gay community. I don't know. That's kind of how I felt. Like
That's a
it
good
kind
point.
of in the gay community and like okay, we were okay with it, but like he's a fucking predator anyways. So like, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe no one
Well,
should be gay because I mean, you know, he was just
I think
a
that's
predator.
a problem that a lot of media has in their portrayal of homosexuals is either they make it some kind of like comedic narrative, or they root a lot of the relationships in predatory behavior.
And then they
don't-
end up not even being gay, apparently. So like that was just like, oh,
Right.
that situation was fucked up. You're like, wait, what? And then like it just like got worse and worse throughout the entire show. And then you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. So gay people are forcing other people to think they're gay, and it's just all fucked up.
I would pose it this way. You know, I made that analogy. Like if you just took 5 random bands from 5 random cities in America, they would perform just as crazy and fucked up as the people in this documentary did. People seeking fame are just going to be performative. If you were to put some of those people, like this whole time, we have to keep in mind this whole time, what's his name? The producer?
Rick.
Rick was there the whole time with cameras behind the cameras, you know, like this whole time Joe's like in the spotlight, you know what I mean?
Sounds like he did some pretty fucked up shit that we didn't really even see in that show. Which I think is another like question of the like morals of this show is like the director and creator of the show himself probably like witnessing so much of this fucked up shit and just exploiting it for a television show, not going to the police or anything.
You know, Rick's coming from that kind of world where like
Crazy shit.
you're encouraging it, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
all of the fucked up shit that happened with the Honey Boo Boo family. Like
Yeah.
Like someone somewhere is like molesting children in that story, you know, but like there's producers all around it, you know what I mean? Like you're turning a blind eye, or you just watch like a season of like Teen Mom, you know.
I think it's important, like we talk about how this is problematic, and then a lot of people are pointing out like that PETA's on his back and everyone's on his back, but it's like at the end, you know how it says like there are more animals in captivity than there are in the wild? Like that's not meaning private owners. I mean zoos and everyone that owns tigers. Like it's not just this small, you know what I mean?
Right.
So like we shouldn't just be criminalizing this, because what happens at a zoo? How many animals die at a zoo? You know, that's just not broadcasted.
I saw early last week a clip of Donald Trump Jr. on Fox News doing an interview. And so the interviewer was like, so what is your family doing, you know, during stay-at-home orders? And he was like, yeah, we just finished Tiger King.
Oh God.
And he said, you know, it was just so interesting. I didn't realize you could get a tiger for $2,000. That was
All of mine were 8,000.
That was his fucking takeaway. Was like, I didn't realize it was so cheap to get a tiger.
Like, actually, you mean I can buy a tiger right now and have it shipped here? Like
we just spent about an hour talking about, like, you know, the ambiguities of the problematic things, and his takeaway from it was, shit, dude, I could have had a tiger this whole time. So in that context, I will start with Jake. Tiger King canceled.
Tiger King canceled. no. I do think, as we talked about, I think like there are positive takeaways that you can get from this show. I think it's worth watching, but I do find it extremely problematic, and the reaction to the show overall extremely problematic. So I think it's something that like people need to examine and take a closer look at and really think like, why did I enjoy this so much? What am I thinking and actually taking away from it? Canceled? I don't quite think so. Problematic? Extremely. Yeah.
Josh, Tiger King canceled?
No, not canceled, because one thing that I think we have all just talked about is we've all become extremely aware of what the hell is going on with these tigers in America and how they're being treated or how they're not being treated. We don't really know.
Sabrina, Tiger King canceled?
I mean, they definitely shouldn't make a second season, but it's like if they try to keep going on, then there's going to be like a problem, because they already made an extra episode, so we better just like cut it there. But it should stay on the air, because unless you're like really rich, hopefully you're not just like, oh, I could buy a tiger. Hopefully you take some different value, but definitely problematic.
I think it's actually, I would do the opposite of canceled. I guess promote. I do think people should be exposed to things like this. And I actually think it's an opportunity for people to exercise like the nuance in cultural moments like this. Like, I see a lot of people trying to like guilt people into watching this show. And I'm guilty of being the kind of asshole that like wants people to feel stupid about shit they watch, but like none of us made this show, you know what I mean? like it wasn't our idea to go. It wasn't our idea to go find a bunch of fucked up people being shitty to each other and hiring each other to murder each other. But in the sense of like that, it did happen and it did exist, and I think that we all have, that cultural experience to know, like, like Josh mentioned, like there was a black bear on his grandma's front yard because someone like Joe Exotic lived fucking a couple miles down the road. Like, these people exist, whether it's problematic or not, it happened. And I think we've talked about enough things that I do think it's actually productive. Like, I think it's a great highlight of Americana exploitation of labor. Like, if you want to see the relationship between employees and employers, like, watch Tiger King and see how people are exploited, whether it's like a volunteer basis like Carol Baskins and they still take advantage of volunteer workers, or like a for hire like with Doc and Joe Exotic, like they're manipulating and exploiting their employees, and like we all understand that in a working context. Or even if you're talking about animal rights or like environmental issues, like every one of these people who are operating these, I don't know, I guess Carol Baskins is a nonprofit, but they're all generating revenue. Like, it's all contingent on like the assumption that they care about the wildlife and the habitats of these animals, but like everything they do is counterintuitive to protecting those things. And so, like, just in that sense, I think watching it highlights a unique moment in time. I don't know. I think you make a season 2 if you can fucking scrounge a season 2 together. Get it going.
On the next problematic.